Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Another roster change going down here in the CDL just ahead of the second weekend of the Major 4 qualifiers. A surprising one again. Rumours were circulating last night that Havok was going to get benched by the Florida Mutineers. Turns out it looks like he stepped away from the starting roster instead. Regardless, interesting situation we're going to dive into. What exactly has caused this, especially when Florida find themselves in a really tricky predicament to try and do anything to qualify for this year's World Championship. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate. Loads of surprising changes. Attached for Fame, Vivid for Kremp, and now Vikkel again into the team for Havok. Pretty much a madness to be honest. But yeah, if you guys have chosen any of those players in your fantasy, you will get the replacement, of course, in due course as well. Now, I wanted to give a quick update for you guys on iLLeY. So we talked the other day, that clip from Ghosty that had come out a few days ago now, and it had been circulating for 3 or 4 days, and I made a video talking about it because there was lots of discussion in the community. Was Ghosty's point on the idea that iLLeY's thumb was potentially injured when he joined the team? Was that Ghosty's perception? Was there potentially a reality? We didn't really know. iLLeY hadn't really commented on the matter. We haven't heard anything from iLLeY about his thumb in a long time, and iLLeY reached out to me and said, hey, Ghosty was just, effectively there was a miscommunication involved there, and iLLeY's thumb was not the reason at all why they decided to make a change when they did. So iLLeY's thumb is 100%, it's good to go, and iLLeY was saying that, you know, he's ready to get back in the league, hopefully in the very near future, and intends to. So just wanted to clarify that, you know, what we discussed the other day with Ghosty and iLLeY and whether that was any issues remaining. That's not the case. There was some miscommunication involved, and iLLeY's thumb is indeed 100% healed, and he's looking for options very shortly indeed. Probably won't be in the league for the rest of the season, but I guess we'll stay tuned because there's been lots of surprising things happening over the last few days. Just wanted to clarify that one. There's also this from Call of Duty that came out yesterday with, well, as they say here, multiplayer maps. So Season 3 launches April the 12th. Now, to be honest here, right, by the time these new multiplayer maps, if they're even any good, arrive, will there actually be time to add them into the rotation for this season? Probably not, to be honest, right? It would have to be for like the Major 5 qualifiers and Major 5 and champs. Unless there's something that really needs to go, probably nothing significant is going to happen. Unless in Search and Destroy, people really want Fortress to go or something like that, and maybe Expo could come in or something. But yeah, multiplayer maps next season, if it is going to be this game played again, as it probably is, then, you know, we're expecting an entirely new map set really after all the maps that they're going to probably release later this year sometime. But for now, that's pretty interesting. They also did introduce Warzone. Well, I haven't seen it yet, but Warzone Ranked is finally arriving. So I guess some, you know, faint hope that they have to keep Warzone alive with a ranked mode. I guess they've figured out the ranked modes actually kind of help maintain the longevity of a game. Whether this is going to take any hackers away from the regular ranked play or exactly what it's going to do remains to be seen. But nonetheless, I thought it was pretty interesting that they've decided to do it. Now, let's dive into the Rostermania situation again. So yesterday, rumours were circulating that more changes were about to go down. I don't know if there's any more to come yet. There might still be. I mean, it's tomorrow the matches start, so probably not for now. But still, rotation, say another one, something else is happening. And, you know, people were saying in the replies, is it London? I mean, because London got absolutely brutalised that final week, right? I mean, they played OpTic and they played Thieves. They didn't win a map and they got bopped out of the series in back-to-back DoorDash challenges. So, you know, as Jamie says, you know, is it Scraps out? Please get rid of Scraps. So, you know, I guess he wants Scraps to go. But the rotation's like unlucky. So that wasn't happening. It's no change with London. And then Jacob Hell says, more roster changes inbound. I'll be fast asleep, but keep your timelines refreshed tonight. So he says, definitely changes are coming here. He actually says changes with an S. So I guess stay tuned for that. Overnight, that only one thing was announced. But the discussion here from the leakers, Jake Hale, the rotation, Ronnie, CDL Intel, and also Crone, was that this was a change that had been decided. This was, you know, this particular player getting benched from the team. The party line from the actual team is a little bit different, but we'll discuss that here in a second. So, you know, then as even Zuma says he finds out about this, I found out the roster news. The team who's making changes, you know who you are. You've got 30 minutes to announce, or I do it for you. Timer starts now. And then as Crone says, Go woke up and chose to wreak havoc, right? So obviously discussing Havok and all this type of stuff. And then we got this from CDL Intel, and then also from Zuma, and then from Crone at a similar time. Havok is expected to be benched by the Mutineers. I believe even Zinni said on stream, like, a terrible team is going to stay terrible, or something like that. Maybe he didn't say that, but that was just being discussed around. So implying that it was going to be one of the teams towards the bottom of the league, and then Crone says Havok is expected to be benched by the Mutineers. So I don't believe, of course, the announcement that the Mutineers did here, we'll see in a second, is slightly different in terms of reasoning everything to what the leakers were suggesting, but I believe it was a surprise to them, potentially, of the reasons that eventually were given by the Mutineers for Havok stepping away, because I believe the understanding was throughout all of these guys that Havok was getting benched by the team. Now, it's obviously the reasons for that are unclear. We'll see in a second. But I don't think the perception was that Havok was stepping away. I think it was more that the team actually had decided to make this call, that was what they thought was best for the team. And it's an interesting discussion in general, whether, I mean, well, we'll see in more detail in a second. And then Zoom is on stream as well. Vickel's coming back in. Havok's going to go. And this now became public knowledge. And shortly afterwards, Mutineers were replying to Vickel's tweets. And then they tweeted out the following: due to personal reasons, Havok will be taking a step back from the starting roster. We will be moving him to our substitute position for the time being, sending love his way. So yeah, interesting stuff. Like, obviously hoping all the best with Havok, right? If he's you know, either struggling with mental or physical stuff and he wants to step away and get back in the right headspace in the future, hopefully, you know, the time off is valuable and hope he feels better shortly, right? It's just interesting that Mutineers come up with this reasoning, but I'm pretty convinced, to be honest, that a lot of the guys that were leaking this thought that this was just straight up him getting benched from the team. So I don't exactly know what the situation is here, whether Havok has stepped away or whether the team decided to step in and say, maybe it is personal reasons, right? But maybe they're like, look, Havok, I think it's better if you just step out of the team right now because it's not, you know, great for the entire team environment. Probably both can be true in some aspect, but obviously wishing the best for Havok going forwards. Very interesting set of circumstances though, right? Because Havok was one of their, you know, better, more consistent players, I thought. Now, Havok's numbers never look particularly good on his lineman cards because he's a slower player, right? He's a more route-heavy guy. He's never getting high engagements, high KDs necessarily, but he's doing some of the work that needs to be done on the team. So his lineman cards never look that good, but actually his numbers were better than Vickel's when he was in the team overall. So I don't believe this is something that they'll be, you know, it's not an ideal set of circumstances, I guess, here for Florida. They probably don't want Havok to be gone in an ideal world, but it might just be that chemistry internally just collapsed to a point where this had to be done. And to be honest, it's not a massive surprise. If you're in a situation like Florida, you're, okay, they've done okay lately. They haven't been terrible. I mean, they came top 8 of the major. They took down the Subliners, but their first week here back in the league, like, hasn't been particularly good. Okay, they took FaZe game 5, but outside of that, wasn't particularly impressive. Fellow does say as well, nothing but love for my brother Havok. I'm sure with some time away, he'll be back and better. So kind of implying that Havok lately hasn't been either the best player or the best teammate or whatever due to various things that Havok's been dealing with. So, you know, in time, I'm sure that'll return. And Havok is certainly a pro league caliber level player, but you know, he's not a top 6 team in the league pro league caliber player. In my opinion, he's one of the players that's going to be on the teams 7 through 12, and I think he's definitely valuable of a spot like that. But obviously on the Florida Mutineers lately hasn't been working out so well. You look at the numbers here overall, they did need some more production from the SMG side of things, I would say. Capstol, he's been getting fried a lot. In fairness, I think one of these control maps he went like 12 and 35, so I think that kind of brings down his average a fair bit. But you look at the SMGs, Havok and Cap, they've had you know, KDs in the 0.9s, 0.85 ranges, not been super impressive. And Havok as well is, by the numbers, the slowest player on the team, certainly in hardpoint. Not the case in the control, but in hardpoint he's the slowest player, plays a lot of the routes and stuff like this. So you know, you can understand. So how much his impact is always felt is a bit of a question mark, but I think in general, when teams have lost so many of their past however many series, like, they're going to get to a point where their chemistry is just pretty much shot. And, you know, Havok's a pretty vocal guy, right? If things aren't going so well, Havok's going to let you know about it. And, you know, I guess Vickel, they think that that's just going to be better for the team for the immediate term. But regardless of the situation, they're not making champs anyway. This team has never been particularly competitive. They did try and make this change, and when they got rid of Major Maniac and went for the fellow route, I thought, all right, this team could get better in respawn, but their Search and Destroy is going to suffer. And since they've made this change, they're 3 and 8 in Surge. And that was always their bread and butter, right, Florida? They would always do a Game 5 Search and Destroy W, but it's not happening lately. And I don't think it's more likely to happen with Vickel than Havok, because Havok has been known for his career as a great Search and Destroy player. Okay, his numbers this season in Search might not be particularly good. And actually, his most recent first blood to first death ratio is actually pretty terrible. But, you know, still, put him in a 1v1, Havok's usually going to win it. He's been a good player in Search generally, and has been a key reason why a lot of his teams have been rather good at Search and Destroy. This iteration, though, straight up has not been the case. Now, there has been some questions. What's Havok going to do next? Where's he going to go next? What, you know, even from Breaking Point here, this benched CDL roster goes kind of hard. I don't know about it personally, right? I feel like this team would get absolutely fried. But nonetheless, it does make you think how much talent there is that's now stuck on the bench of certain teams. Vivid, Havok, iLLeY, and Attach would be a very interesting team. There's some slaying in there, but I don't think there's quite enough slaying in there to make this team work on a high level. But it still just goes to show how much talent there is really sitting on the bench of many of these teams right now. And, well, hopefully they can get back in the league at some point in the near future. Obviously, the league expanded, that would be nice, but probably not going to happen. So Mutineers play Surge this Friday. So just tomorrow, there's a game ongoing. This is a bounty game as well, an extra 10k on the line. So yeah, big one for the Mutineers. Frankly, I think their season is chalked, to be honest, and this chalked it up even more so, but just a very interesting set of circumstances with exactly why Havok is gone and what that means for his future, because, you know, he's taken steps out of the league before to try and get back in, and it's worked for him a couple of times. Hopefully it'll work again in the future. Speaking of Florida and where they sit, I did want to look at this. So last night, I think some people were mentioning this in the comments a few days ago. What would the CDL standings look like if there was only 5 points per online win and still the major points were allocated as they are? So I thought, you know what, I'll just go through and figure this out. So these are the current standing numbers on the far right hand side. And if you halve the amount of points gained for online matches, it calculates to the new points here. So there are a couple of things that change around. So Boston dropped down to 7th and Surge go up to 6th. Because Surge have been better on land, Boston are very good online. And also Mutineers and Los Angeles Guerrillas swap as well. They're currently on 70 points both. But if it was done this way, then Mutineers will actually be marginally ahead. So a few observations to make here. So the idea is that the online points now, the difference between the points in this situation and the current points is the same as the amount of points they get from online in this circumstance, because I halved it. Therefore, if you were to double it, you would get this number again added on. But teams like FaZe and Toronto, the teams that have won at LAN events, they're still right at the top. And what I like about this, to be honest, is that it doesn't change the order dramatically, right? The order is relatively similar to what it is presently, but I would say this has tightened the battle for the World Championship, or at least in terms of the seedings going into the majors. Now, some would disagree because they say, all right, well, there's 60 points between OpTic and Vegas here, and there's 80 points between OpTic and Vegas here. But because the online points are worth less, then it actually means that this is still spread out, which is technically true. But from my perspective, if you go to a major event, let's say Vegas turn up to Major 4 and they win, and OpTic come last, in this new format with only 5 points for online, they could breach that gap. Vegas can move to 1-3-5 and leapfrog OpTic over one major weekend. Whereas currently, they could only get to 1-6-5, which would only put them 5th. So Vegas could currently win an event and they'd only move up to 5th, whereas if they were to win an event in the format with only 5 points for online and online was less meaningful, they could get up to 3rd, technically. So I think that's kind of what I'm really getting at there. And what it does mean is that when you turn up to a major, that event weekend is way more impactful than these online matches, because as it stands, the majority of the league has more points from online than LAN. If you imagine these numbers were doubled, the only teams in the league that have more points from majors than online are FaZe and Toronto. Like, because FaZe have 90 points online, Toronto have 100 points online, and they have more than that from LAN. But every other team, with the exception of Surge, that have the same, has more from online than the actual majors, which I think is outrageous. This, to me, is way better, because the only teams in the league that have more from online than LAN in this setting are the teams at the very bottom that are terrible on LAN. Apart from that, the majors are more impactful, and it also means there's just more possibilities when it gets to Major 5 in terms of how things could change around. So I thought this was pretty interesting. It pretty much ended up how I wanted it to, with not too many drastic changes, but enough, I think, to make the season and the league more interesting and equitable, to be honest, because I think the majors should straight up just be more valuable. But intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Regardless, Florida is screwed. It's basically what I'm getting at here. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.